Hi, my name is John McAllister. Welcome to the Setting Trick podcast. Today I have an episode with two guests, and they are Bronia Jenkins, who is the executive director of the American Contract Bridge League, and Ladawna Parham, who is the executive director of the ACBL Educational Foundation, of which I am a board member. And Ladawna reached out to me over text a couple weeks ago asking me if we could do a conversation where we explain some of the similarities and differences between these two organizations that were once actually together. When the ACBL Education Foundation started, it was part of the ACBL. And so just to start out, I think people probably know Bronia a little bit better. Ladawna, you're not really a bridge player. We hired you to be the executive director of the ACBL Education Foundation last year, I think.
At the end of last year. I started in November.
And Bronia, you're also relatively new to the job, but you've been playing bridge for a long time, but you started when did you start as
I started
in
May, so it's been a year and a little bit. So I call it 1 year in kind of thing. So now both these organizations are being run by phenomenal women. So we plan to go very far. And thank you for having us on the podcast. We love working together. We love what we're doing for Bridge. We do have slightly different missions, but they're actually very complementary.
Ladawna, you were not a bridge player before you started.
I am working on it. Although when you work as closely with someone like Bronia or you or Robert Todd or the other people who are on my board, I don't know that I'll ever feel comfortable saying I'm a bridge player within that world, because there's so many amazing people that I work with every day. So I'm a novice.
But bridge is about playing bridge. You know, there are different levels of bridge, just like there's different levels of tennis, just like there's different levels of golf. But just because you're a bad bridge player doesn't make you not a bridge player, okay? Because we all make mistakes, and we know that for a fact. From the very top bridge player to the very worst bridge player, everybody makes mistakes. And that's the fun thing about bridge. And what keeps you coming back to bridge, just like golf, just like tennis, is when you make those good plays, when you beat somebody in a hand where you do something that you had not been able to do before, and all of a sudden you see something, and that's what makes bridge such a great game. That's what makes golf such a great game. So I think we all in the bridge world need to recognize that being a bridge player does not mean that you are an expert. It just means you love to play bridge.
So yeah, coming at it as not a bridge player previously, but super passionate about the work that we do. I've been in nonprofit management for over 20 years, which is embarrassing or difficult to say out loud. Like, how has it been that long? But I have been in nonprofit management for over 20 years in more direct service capacities. I've worked in domestic violence and elder care services and hunger and homelessness. But there are common threads throughout all of that of what communities need to stay engaged with each other to provide healthy atmospheres and hope and growth and safe spaces for kids. And so Bridge really appealed to me, one, because it was stepping out of that direct service piece in the way that I had been, but two, because I can get at some of those opportunities to keep kids and communities engaged with each other in new ways. I think I've mentioned to both of you before how with us being such a virtual world and they have every possible thing at their fingertips with social media and Snapchat and TikTok and all of the things, keeping kids connected to each other and based somewhere in a healthy way has started to go by the wayside a bit. And I think it hurts us. And so any opportunity to grow the mind sport that keeps them involved with each other, I'm super excited about.
And Bronia, how did you first meet Ladawna?
I met her, I believe, at the Nationals in Louisville, maybe, or in Atlanta. In Atlanta, did we meet? Yes, we met in Atlanta. I'd heard of her before because I was talking with Robert Todd, even before when they were looking for a new executive director. I had worked with Kristen a little bit, although Kristen's tenure as executive director was ending as I was kind of starting. So Ladawna and I have had several conversations, about how to work together, how to make things better, how we can focus on leveraging each other's worlds. So, sharing stuff on social media. I am the commentator, for example, for the Spark auction, not the Spark auction, the Spark tournament that is happening this year. And I did it last year as well with Barry Regal. So how does the ACBL support the Educational Foundation so that they can raise money so that they can then get new young players to play? I think the Educational Foundation is very focused on education. And I think the ACBL is a little bit more focused on entertainment. So basically, like, we're focusing on how do we make bridge fun and how do we have people come to tournaments and play and have a good time. And the Educational Foundation, I think, is focusing on how do we get new young players to want to play the game. Did I say that right, you think, Ladawna, or not so much?
Absolutely. And certainly players across all walks of life and all ages. We have programs that touch on all of that. We've got a new grant that we're doing with the YMCA to do Exercise Your Mind at the Y that are for adults. But absolutely, there is an emphasis on bringing in those younger players because we do want to build up that next generation of bridge.
So like one program that I know that Bronia has helped fund and that the Ed Foundation is helping fund is Patty Tucker's Jumpstart Bridge program.
Right. So we're really excited about that program because, Patty Tucker, people have been working a long time to figure out how to get in the schools. And it's been a difficult road. And it feels like we might actually have a little bit of a door opening here through this program. So what we're doing is we're training volunteers to go to these regional gifted conferences that are run by the school districts so that we can then get the programs in the schools. This is the long game, right? Getting programs in the school is the long game. So Patty goes, but she can't be at every regional conference. Therefore, we need volunteers who she trains to go to these conferences to get us into the schools. And that's actually happening. And we funded some of it. Ladawna's funded some of it because we're basically saying this is important. This is a good way to get into the schools. And if we can do it, we should just do it in whatever way that we can.
Absolutely. And she's reached hundreds of new players, which is so exciting. And every time she reports out on it, it's just this massive success with new volunteers signing up, new teachers signing up, and working with those gifted teachers, as you mentioned, has been a huge, that is the open door. They have so much more discretion in what they do with those classes. That's really become our in. And it's so exciting to see her success with that.
So how exactly, because when you texted me, Ladawna, your motivation for this was to help people understand differences between the two organizations. How exactly has that been coming up for you?
So I think that we both have people or groups reaching out to us thinking we do what the other organization does and kind of having to reroute that and support them. And obviously we work together to support all those people. But I'll have people reach out to me asking me about tournaments, asking about their membership and has it lapsed and have they paid, asking about their BBO and what they're supposed to do at each of things. I'm like, that is an amazing question. Let me to help you with that. And I think that Bronia's group has people reach out sometimes asking for grants that are out of the purview of what they do that are more in line with what we do. And so I think it's just really helpful to help folks understand that we are completely separate organizations, completely separate, different 501 numbers, separate entities. But we do work really closely together because we're all here for the same overarching mission, which is to support Bridge. We do that in different ways, just like if Joe were able to join us from the USBF or the ABTA, there are different organizations doing it, but we're all here to support Bridge. But I think some of those differences need to be a little clearer for people.
If you get an email, somebody asking you about your master points or their BBO stuff, do you forward that, or do you reply and copy Bronia on that, or what's
Not Bronia, but there are different people, and I'm starting to get better because starting in November, I still feel like the new girl. There's so much in this world to take in, but I'm starting to get better about knowing who at the ACBL handles each kind of question. Like, is it related to their marketing, or is it related to College Bowl? I'm probably reaching out to Stephanie. If it's related to membership, there are member or support emails that I can send that to. And so I'm getting better about that on my end. Certainly not perfect, but I try not to harass Bronia with too much.
That's true. That is very true. And I think the big difference is, we're an operation, right? We run the Bridge League, right? So we run the national tournaments, okay? And then we sanction other events. That's essentially what the ACBL does. We sanction events and we run the national tournaments. So that's kind of what we do. And sometimes people are even sort of confused about that, right? So I get a lot of questions about clubs or sectionals or regionals, which is something we don't actually run. So people, in general, there's a lot of different facets to our organizations, and it is kind of tricky to understand. So I don't blame people for not necessarily knowing where to go. And so when I do get an email, I get lots of emails of different things. What I tend to do is I reply and I say, I'm engaging the help of Sherry Terraciano, or I'm engaging the help of Ladawna, or I'm engaging the help of so-and-so to help us with this problem, whatever it is. And I send it back to the people so that I'm still communicating with them, but I'm sort of sending them over to the place that can help them. And most of the time, the people that I send them to take over and actually do a pretty good job of responding to the question.
It's interesting, though. I didn't even realize, that you guys don't run regionals, for example, but you do oversee the directing. Like, how's it work with the directors?
Right.
The tournament directors.
Sure. So that's why I'm saying it's interesting, because the directors work for the ACBL. Okay. So we run the directors, but what we do is we assign directors to various tournaments, and then they work with the sponsor of the tournament to make that tournament happen. So the directors work for us, but they're really working for the sponsor of that tournament when they are running that tournament. It makes sense, but it's complicated, it's tricky, and it's a challenging thing to figure out. How many directors do we send to places? Which directors do we send to places? What kind of events should you be running? The more events you run, the more directors you need. The more you are in different locations within your hotel, the more directors you need. So there's all sorts of complexities to running tournaments that people don't really fully grasp.
Aren't there directors that are also not employees of the ACBL, like club games, for example? Like, they're not employed by. Like, there's a certain level of competence that you have to be an ACBL director, right?
Right, an ACBL tournament director. Now, we have lots of local club directors that run their local club games. So as a matter of fact, I took the club directors course a couple of months ago with Lynn Yoko, who's amazing. And it's not easy. This stuff is not easy. The rules are not easy. There's a lot of nuances to the rules. And so, and there's a lot of nuances to ACBL score and to the way you're supposed to say things to people and the rules, and so, I didn't take the club director's test. I'm not sure that I would have passed it, but I decided that I didn't need to take it yet. I might have to take the class one more time before I can take the test.
That's totally fair. It's such a complicated game, and then knowing it to the level and having that confidence level that you could step in that role would be tough. I certainly, regardless of my level, wouldn't want to do that. I don't even want to be a timer at my son's swim meet. I'm like, I don't want that responsibility. Like, if I mess that up, so I can imagine.
Ladawna, have you played in a club game?
Not yet. When I have been at different tournaments, my focus has been on trying to meet people and related to the Ed Foundation. So I haven't done that piece of it yet. More than a little intimidated, but I'll get there.
The funny thing is, I was, when you talk to bridge players, right? One of the common things you'll hear is, you hold, right? And then they give you your hand. You hold ace third, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And the directors, they joke around and say, when you get in a group of directors, they don't say you hold, they say you rule, right? So your ruling was this, and then they talk to each other about the ruling. So the same thing kind of happens in the directors world that does happen in the bridge world, except they're talking about the ruling that they made, based on what's going on. And those rules are very different from the actual mechanics of the game of bridge.
So they tell you what they ruled. They start out by telling you what they ruled?
Well, they say the same thing. Like when they're in the director's suite after the game discussing whatever they're discussing, like they joke around, like the bridge players, they say you hold, and the directors, they say you rule. And then they ask the question about the thing that they ruled about, and talk to each other about how did I do on that ruling, kind of thing.
And like the directors that work for the ACBL, is their actual title tournament director? Is that
so there's tournament directors, there's associate, there's several ranks within the director world, right? There's national director is the top, and then associate national director, and I don't even know, then there's tournament director, and then there's like director in training, there's different ranks. I don't even know that I told you all the ranks correctly.
Ladawna, what's been the hardest part about kind of learning this world as an outsider?
As an outsider,
becoming an insider?
So learning the internal language, because it's like a complete foreign language. Hearing everybody talk about what happens at the clubs and how they're communicating with each other, that has been very interesting. And then layering that over the grants that we do and our focus on our grants and making sure that we are staying aligned with that and understanding the difference between, is this something that's our purview? Is this something that's the ACBL's purview? Is this something that I should be reaching out to a different group about? That has been a lot of it. And then communicating with people who want to submit grants or who haven't received a grant, and just trying to help them refine what they're looking at, what they're asking us for, so that they can come back to us with something stronger. But I've been really excited about our grant program.
Okay. How many grants do you think we've done since you've been, how many have we looked at and how many have we funded since you started approximately?
Since I've started, about 17 have been funded, which has been super exciting, of all sizes, but everything from, I believe I was mentioning summer camps to working with, there's a Boys and Girls Club that's partnering with a local unit to bring it to their Boys and Girls Clubs, but to spread it to kind of their sister Boys and Girls Clubs in the area, to the Y, to Patty Tucker's program, to the kids that are traveling all over the world representing the U.S. It's been phenomenal. And it's also been really exciting to have organizations like the Australian Bridge Federation and the Ugandan Bridge Federation reach out and talk about what we're doing, how we're doing what we're doing, how they're working to support bridge in their countries and what we're doing in ours, the shared difficulty of getting into schools when the schools aren't focused on that kind of thing. It's just been completely fascinating.
Can the ACBL Education Foundation fund programs that are outside the United States?
So we don't have a set restriction that says we can't necessarily, but that is absolutely not our focus. And I don't know that the committee or the board would agree to that unless it was something that directly impacted North America. So Canada, the US, Mexico, unless it was something that directly took place here or impacted here. So for example, we are a funder of BAMSA, Bridges and Mind Sport for All, a research project that's happening out of the University of Sterling, and which is a phenomenal project, but it's happening across multiple countries. It will absolutely impact us here. Some of the research is happening here. We have members of the advisory panels that are based here. So there is a clear connection. But if somebody came to us with a grant saying, we want to grow bridge in Denmark, can you give us money for that? I would say, we love that you're doing that, and we will give you applause. We'll share informational resources, but as far as funding, there's not that connection. So I wouldn't expect that.
And Bronia, if you ask for something from the ACBL Education Foundation, do we just give it to you?
Of course, by definition, whatever I say is what happens. You know what I'm saying? I say, give me this, and it just happens. So yeah, I mean, to some extent, yes. I mean, one of the things is that my view is right now I'm trying to build a good product. And then once we build the good product and we know what our product is really, then the concept of marketing or advertising that product becomes a more real thing. At that point, we might be asking for more real money to be able to do that. So right now, we haven't asked very much from the Educational Foundation in terms of funds. We have some money ourselves, right? So it's not like we need to ask for every dollar. I'm trying to build good product, good online product, and good support for my grassroots people. That's what I'm trying to build. And then once we know what kind of is working the best, to say, okay, now we need real money to be able to deploy that, nationally.
So when you say good product, you're talking specifically about a grassroots program where you're introducing like people to bridge.
That's one of the things. That's one of the things, but it's not the only thing, right? I mean, we want to work on social bridge, like making sure that people, like the way I look at the ACBL right now is we have a division that is duplicate bridge. That is what the ACBL is. I believe the ACBL should be more than duplicate bridge. I believe it should be social bridge. I believe it should be pre-bridge. I believe it should be bridge education. So I'd like to build all of those products so that I can then deploy those products. We have a very good deployment of duplicate bridge. We have duplicate bridge clubs. We have tournaments. We have nationals. We don't have a very good deployment of these other sort of buckets that I'm talking about that I'm trying to build up.
And in order to make that happen, you have to get permission from your board of directors, or how does that work?
I mean, the board of directors and management are very much aligned in what we are doing. So a lot of people talk about, oh my God, management versus the board. That is not happening. It's management with the board. We are working together to build these different products. We are aligned in the way that we are thinking. So I don't, yes, of course I talk to the board and I ask them things, but it's like the Educational Foundation. We're all on the same team, okay? It's really important for the bridge world to realize that we're on the same team, that we're facing the problems together. We share each other's social media posts because that then reaches more people. Like when I see a social media post on Bridge, I share it as myself. I ask people to share it, that are on the management team of the ACBL. I think it's all about, kind of working together rather than trying to go at it alone. Now, having said that, you have to be able to actually do things. So we are like doing things like Intro to Bridge, for example, which is our online educational program to teach people bridge. That's a program that I'm looking to expand. Right now, it runs 3 times a year. That's not enough. It needs to be running. There needs to be one that starts every week. So when we find new people, we can say, hey, I have an Intro to Bridge class that's starting next week. That's one of the things I'm working on. Same with an online social bridge game, working with various, people, BBO, Real Bridge, Tricky Bridge, Into Bridge. There's a lot of people. I don't even know if I want you to post all that. You might have to edit that out. But, working on the concept of social bridge and how we get people to want to come and be part of our community, regardless of how they play bridge. And then the other piece is pre-bridge, before bridge. How do you get people interested? Because when you think about the people that I meet in the streets, and I meet a lot of people in the streets, believe it or not, who, I talk to about bridge who are under 40 years old, their response is always the same. Oh, my grandmother used to play bridge, so like if they know anything about it. So we've got to get to those people where we offer them something that they can go to without it being too unfun. Okay. Like it can't be too much like going to a math class. Okay. People don't want to go to math class. Okay. They already did that. They want to go somewhere where they can have fun, which is kind of the concept of what we've made up, a game called Bridge War, which is a combination of a hand of bridge was the game of war. What is the game of war? The highest card wins. When you say that to people, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I could play that. They come and sit down, and the claim to fame is within 30 seconds, you'll be playing. There's not a lot of explanation. You just sit down and you're just basically playing. It's technically like a 1-no trump hand. Left of the dealer leads, the dummy comes down, and you're playing 1-no trump, And so how do we get that and other pre-bridge games? It's not the only pre-bridge game, but how do we get people to bite into that so that they actually have fun playing and may want to learn more about bridge?
And I think that's one of those areas where moving forward, a big part of my task is that making bridge accessible to people who don't want to be in math class again, to people who think that it is their, great grandmother's bridge and not something that they would be invested in. And so I think those are opportunities for us to work together in supporting pre-bridge options. I shouldn't even say this on a podcast because it's the very early stages, but I've met with a screenwriter about a movie opportunity that's coming up, because, we all saw it happen with chess after the Queen's Gambit, where it just became mainstream to talk about it. And I think that's part of what we're missing, is that mainstream accessibility and interest. So I think those are things that we want to do as well, and great ways that we'll be working together in the future.
Ladawna, I have to tell you, so we started like this search for executive director, I don't know, like 6 months maybe before Bronia was hired, maybe longer. And I've known Bronia, through tournaments, and we've become friends. And I have to say, that it was really exciting when I found out that Bronia was going to be the executive director of the ACBL. And I think a lot of people shared that sentiment. And Bronia and I were at this tournament, a regional in Reston here, this past week, and we were talking one night. I sought her out because I knew we were having this conversation, and it really, I was like, wow, these ideas that you're talking about with this bridge war, it's like an intro class that starts every week, so that it's going to happen, and you can point people, because I get a lot of people that are curious about bridge, that want to know how they can get started, and I feel like that's like this thing. It's like you get somebody. My friend's dad recently was like, I'm interested in trying bridge, and I gave him something, but there's a local teacher, but she requires a big commitment, and in terms of time, and it's just not so easy. And the idea of really making it easy for people to start playing is exciting, because I bet you've probably experienced that yourself, Ladawna. Like, how do you get started? Like, you're trying to learn this game as you're, diving into this, into the deep end.
And I think that is the most difficult thing for all of our programs, is how do we make it something that is easy? I know that a huge part of it is the challenge. A huge part of it is the difficulty. But when you're just starting out, you aren't ready for the challenge and the difficulty. You want it to be challenging enough that it keeps your interest, but not so much that you're like, I cannot do this, leave me alone. I'll tell you, the first place I started learning it was actually that app, Tricky Bridge. Like, as soon as, I think it's a phenomenal app, but as soon as I was even looking at this world, I researched it and went on there. And I think things like that are phenomenal, but Bridge War, things that take it out of online apps into that next step, I think are great, but everything that makes it accessible is a huge focus for us, and I think should be.
And in Bridge War, Bronia, is it actually, so the person who deals the cards, they're the declarer, and the person to their left? Okay.
Yeah, just that way you just get it going quick, It's like left of the dealer leads. Now, I'll be honest, when we've gone to play it at like pickleball events, we made up the hands, right, to make them like reasonably set up. So obviously it's kind of important. I mean, if you deal out the cards, you know, you may not get a good one no trump hand. That's kind of one of the problems, right? Is that, you know, but a lot of people have dealing machines and set up, you know, things where we can set up like one no trump type hands. You don't want to call them one no trump type hands to people who don't play bridge, because then they're like, what the hell's going on? But when you talk to bridge players and say you set up a one no trump hand, it's not that complicated. I kind of joke around and I say, well, Bridge War 7 is one no trump, right? And once you get to 7 tricks, then I joke around to the people who are playing and say, okay, now it's about embarrassing the opponents by taking more tricks. The next thing would be Bridge War 8, which would be like a 2-spade contract, right? Like, so basically where spades is trump, right? You'd have to have like a continuation. And right now we're still in the very, very preliminary stages, in my mind at least, of what do pre-bridge games look like? You know, we don't really, you know, we have Just Declare that exists through BBO, you know, but how do we get people to go to that in a super, you know, way where they get there and they have fun and then they want to come back? And we don't quite have that yet.
And getting that out to a community of people who aren't already interested in bridge because they already have that stereotype in mind that this isn't for me. So how do we take that and get that in front of people who would otherwise not even look at it?
You saw this job post for ACBL Executive Ed Foundation Executive Director Ladawna. You started researching. Tell us some of the things that you kind of came across that sort of grabbed you.
Like at the Ed Foundation specifically?
No, just about bridge, probably more broadly speaking. But yeah, I guess you could expand it to the Ed Foundation. Sure.
So one of the things that I was super interested in when I first started learning was this history bridge that I knew nothing about. So for all my Bridgerton people out there, when you hear them talk about whist or you see them playing whist, that was a precursor to bridge. And so, and looking at the way that's changed and evolved, but how it had this massive role in our society, even up through the 40s and 50s. There was a whole TV show, and then some of the big player names like Omar Sharif and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, people that everybody's heard of, but that maybe if you aren't in the bridge world, you had no idea that this was such a huge part of things for them. And I have told several people that this world is like the most positive, healthy mafia that I could think of, because it's totally underground for people who aren't in that world. But, you know, when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of players in the US, and if you aren't already in the bridge world, nobody has any idea. They think it's just their grandmother at the kitchen table. They have no idea. And so it was just fascinating to me to see how massive it was. And then when I went to my first NABC in Atlanta, and there are just so many people and they're so passionate about it. And I was telling you guys earlier, just sitting there after each one of the sessions, hearing them argue about, you should have done this and you should have done that. And just the vitality of the game is something I think that you just have no idea exists until you become engrossed in this world. And so as I started into it, that's what really hooked me and fascinated me.
And when you talk to people outside the bridge world about the bridge world, it actually is a pretty interesting story. People are like, wow, you go to tournaments, you do this, you do that. And what do you get? You get master points. And like, I mean, and how to like what is a professional bridge player and all that kind of stuff. It's a crazy world. It's camp for adults, right? Tournaments are camps for adults. It's a camp where basically what you're doing is you're always playing bridge. You know, in regular camp, you have 1 day of archery, 1 day of canoeing, 1 day of arts and crafts. In bridge tournaments, you have 7 days of bridge or 10 days of bridge. And yet people love it. They never want to stop playing. Like people just want to keep playing because there's always another hand. I mean, you know, I used to teach probability. So 52C52, 52C13 or whatever, how many ever different hands you can have, right? When you play bridge, like you know, I don't know that you get the exact same hand how many times. It's like every hand is different, and every hand has its own opportunities and pitfalls. You rough with 3 little, and you shouldn't have. You know, like you needed to not rough that trick. It's so hard not to rough with the 3 of hearts, and yet that's what you needed to do.
Yeah, you would never rough when you didn't need to rough, Bronia.
I roughed when I need to rough. I roughed. I let Billy make his game, and he beat me in that finals of that tournament in Reston that we were both at, John.
Bronia, for those listening, Bronia and I were at this tournament, and in the Swiss on Saturday, she's playing at the same table as her partner, Billy Cohen, and she was explaining how that by roughing with her 3 small trumps, she gave Billy an opportunity to reach the dummy that now allowed him to make his unmakeable contract had she opted not to rough.
Yeah, it's really hard to not rough when you can. I'll tell you that. It's really hard. You really have to think about it, and I really did it.
It's like my mom. I send my mom this podcast, and she's like, I have no idea who or what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, the bridge world is a fascinating world. It is full of very intelligent people. It is full of people who are very accomplished in many ways. And then they sit down at the bridge table, and it is the great equalizer. Okay. It is the great equalizer, because you could play against somebody who is, you're like, oh, I got no problems here. And all of a sudden they've like end played you into making the contract like 3 times kind of thing. And you're like, what just happened here? Like, how did this happen? You don't recognize this person. You don't know who they are. And then they make it, some good plays against you. And you're like, oh, okay, this person knows how to play. It's a really fascinating thing. To say to somebody, well played, good defense, good bid. It's really fun to get to do that, even when you lose.
I have started having gatherings with some friends of mine who are completely not involved in the world, although most of them have started on the Tricky Bridge app. They're like tipping their toes in the water, but they're like, we need a bridge update. Like, we need, like, what's on the agenda today? What's happening in the bridge world? And every time it's some new thing that's happened, they're like, that is so crazy. How is that happening in this world? And we have no idea. It's super fun.
One of the things that I think we're working towards, and I don't have a solution at all, is like the concept of a partnership desk, right? Like, how do you create partners? Because one of the big problems with new players is the ability to find a partner. I think that's a big issue. So the question is, how do we get with a dating site like eHarmony, or Match.com, and create a little bridge division of Match.com so that people can find their bridge partner?
It's hilarious. Absolutely. We're in. Come to us. We'll talk about it.
All right. Sounds good.
That's so true. I've got a friend from here in Charlottesville who's talking about going to the Toronto NABC, starts in a little over a week. And he's like looking for somebody who he can play with up there. And he found some person on Bridge Winners. I think then they're going to try it out. And I was just thinking about how much, like, that's just going to give him so much more sort of like, oh, I have this one person I can connect with, and now we're in it together. And it is not so easy to find bridge partners, I think.
I think that's a great idea, Bronia.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely always thinking about how do we create some sort of like partnership situation for people. And right now it's done through people, and that's okay. You need an actual person that's bringing people together. So I send people to the partnership chairs of the tournaments, to the partnership chairs of the units, and work to do that. It used to be in the old days that there were always standbys at the clubs, and it used to be in the old days that there were night games, and both of those things are no longer here, and that's a big problem for us.
Ladawna, you mentioned Tricky Bridge. The ACBL Ed Foundation actually provided a pretty big grant to that project to help make it free for people. And that's something that I've referred a lot of people to Tricky Bridge, although I don't know. It's not necessarily getting people like, I don't know, like what's a win, Bronia, from Tricky Bridge? Like what do you want to see when you get somebody, when you tell somebody about bridge or refer them somewhere?
Right. So the good thing about Tricky Bridge, from what I understand, and I've played on it a little bit, is first of all, they have some cool graphics. So it appeals to younger people, which I think is really good. And the second thing is it's very self-driven. So you don't need a teacher. You just go on there and you're playing, and you kind of like it. And so then you play more. So I do know of some young people who have gotten involved through Tricky Bridge. And so what we're trying to do is connect with Tricky Bridge so that we can kind of work together to, like, he's getting thousands of people who are loving bridge through Tricky Bridge. How do we get them, from that to actually maybe, getting to a social bridge scene, whether that social bridge scene be online or not online, to get to the next level, to maybe eventually get to the real duplicate scene. Like there has to be a path from going to, I just go on the app by myself and I play with the robots, to then I want to be able to play with people, to then I want to be able to play online, to then I want to be able to play in real life. I think there has to be some sort of path that goes like that. And so hopefully we can do that with Tricky Bridge.
And that's one thing I can share is that when I started to play bridge, I absolutely loved it. And the only outlet that I knew about it was at home with my parents. And so whenever I would go home, I would want to play, and we would do that. But like, I had no idea. I lived in New York City, like 2 blocks from the largest bridge club in the country at the time. And it didn't even occur to me to go there. And so I think that's one of the, the challenges is that people might really, well, I mean, maybe today it's different because there's so much information, so much more widely available through the internet and doing a Google search, for example.
Right. But the truth is, when I wanted to start playing bridge, I sort of knew that there were these things called bridge clubs, but I didn't really know what they were. So I ran around asking everybody till I found this lady who worked at the YWCA or whatever. And she's like, oh, my brother is the president of the bridge club. Here's the phone number. She gave me the number. I called the guy, and he's like, show up anytime. We always have a standby. And there was a night game. And that's how I started to play. I showed up, and we don't have that anymore. And that's a problem. But what we do have is we have online access. So what we've got to give people, the first access, in my opinion, in today's world, has to be through the online world. And we got to do that. And then, potential, and then send them to the next piece, which is kind of the live world. It's a little different, I think, than it used to be.
And Bronia, you're also you've won multiple NABC Plus events. I know you played in the Junior World Championships. I think did you lose in the finals?
I did lose in the finals to the U.S. I lost to Debbie team. Rosenberg and Martha Katz. Those girls always beat me no matter what. I always lose to Debbie Rosenberg. I've never beaten her once in any event, by the way. So Debbie, I'm waiting for that day to come. But yes, so we lost in the finals to them. And by the way, it's not like my team was a slouch team. I think I had Jeff Hampson and Fred Gittleman on my team. So I don't know what happened there. I mean, they didn't carry us well enough, apparently. But it's funny to me. And I think Brad Moss was on the other team. So there you go. And then I won my first nationals, actually, with Brad Moss. And that was his first nationals also. But he's gone on to win about, 100 world championships, and I've won none. But I loved playing with those people. I always have a great time when I play bridge. It's really, really fun. And it's just the best game. It's the best game.
I'd like to ask a quick question of you guys, just kind of stepping back a little bit, talking about the clubs and that kind of thing. If there were suddenly 1 million new players, what kind of infrastructure do you think would need to be in place to support those players and keep them engaged?
I mean, to me, we have that infrastructure. That's the one thing we do have. We have a network of clubs across the nation, and that's the great thing about bridge is when I actually moved from Chicago to Basel, Switzerland, I found bridge players. And then when I moved from Basel, Switzerland to London, I found bridge players. Okay. And then I got married and started playing golf, and I stopped playing bridge, but that was a different thing. That's the beautiful thing is you can find bridge players wherever you go, and the game is the same. The conventions might be different, but the game is the same. So you can sort of play anywhere. So we have that infrastructure. Now, what we don't necessarily have are enough people that if those 1 million bridge players showed up, you'd want to organize those games and make sure you had the people there to help out. But I think if you had the 1 million bridge players, you'd find the people who are willing to help out. We'd have to set it up and be ready. And that's what I mean by setting up our product so that we're kind of ready to welcome all these new players once we advertise nationally or internationally on this is, come join the ACBL because this is what you can do here. But then I think you have that infrastructure of clubs. There's clubs all over the place.
That had been asked of me as I was looking at different brands that have come our way or different strategies or supporting things like Bridgeware, that kind of thing. Like, well, what would you really do? What how would you increase the infrastructure to support it if all these players came in? So it's good to hear you say you feel like that's there, but if you build it, they will come, kind of thing.
Right. But the thing is, if you do want to get some newer players in the game, younger players, you better have night games. You better have weekend games, because they're not going to be able to go at 1:00 in the afternoon, to a club game. So that does have to change. But it's doable, but it has to change.
Bronia, one of the biggest thing that the ACBL does, I think, is in sanctioning all these games is you guys keep the master points. Do you know how many master points you have, Ladawna? 0? Is that a 0? You have 0 master points? Bronia, do you know how many master points you have?
Apparently I do, but I'm not sure that I reported them properly at the tournament. I do know how many master points I have, and I don't have very many YTD. Year to date, I didn't get a lot of master points, and last year I didn't get a lot of master points either because unfortunately, I don't get to play bridge a lot. Fortunately, I think about bridge all the time, so it doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, no master points for me at this
point. Is there like a target maybe by year end that you would have, Ladawna, your first... Are you a member of the ACBL, Ladawna?
Yes. Yeah. You kind of catch me out, but I am.
So do you get the Bridge Bulletin magazine and
the speakeasy and all the things. So the ACBL is great on communication. And it's interesting to kind of flip through and see everybody's stories and strategies and ads for those cruises that always look amazing though. Never get to go on. Yeah.
I've never been on a cruise ever, so one day maybe I'll go on a bridge cruise.
Jealous of you and live vicariously through.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you coming to the tournament in Toronto in a couple weeks, Ladawna?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hopeful that the board members that are there can get together and grab dinner or drinks after the meeting. And
maybe we'll get you your first live session.
Oh, that sounds stressful. But...
Are they having midnights in Toronto, Bronia?
I think there are some evening games, but they're no longer midnights. I mean, when we change the schedule, the midnight is now at 7:30.
Right. Right.
The 7:30 is the new midnight.
Right. Right.
7:30 feels nice and reasonable.
Well, we'll have to play sometime, Ladawna, or maybe do Bridge War or something. We get you,
Bridge War. Maybe
Bridge War.
Yeah. No, play real bridge. You guys are at the real bridge level. You're not a bridge war. You're no. You got to play real bridge
level. John's like here,
but that's okay. I mean, I have played many sessions with beginning players for a variety of reasons. It's really okay to play without conventions. It's really okay to just bid and play. And if you get into the wrong contract, you're just in the wrong contract. You play the cards, and then you go to the next hand. Agreed. It's really okay to be wrong. It really is.
Yeah. I'm fully on board with that. I think just going in like that, just playing, I think.
Just playing.
That's the best way to learn.
Yeah. Just bid 3, no trump a lot. If you look at your hand, your partner opens the bidding. If your partner opens the bidding and you like your hand, bid 3, no trump. If your partner opens the bidding in one of a major and you look and you have some cards in the major and you like your hand, bid 4 of the major and let's just move right along. Otherwise, just pass and we'll just see what happens.
Anything else we need to cover here for the? Feel like we haven't mentioned.
Is there anything that you can say about what the USBF does that's different than what we do? I think that's helpful for people to know. Sure.
So the USBF is the organization that organizes the international bridge. So what does that mean? So when the United States, our zone is sending people to international tournaments, that is run and organized by the USBF. Jan Martel has been sort of in charge of that forever. She's amazing. She organizes everything, and people go and try out to play for representing the United States at a world championship. Okay, so you get to go to the team trials, which is run every year in Schaumburg in the month of May, sometimes a little bit in April. And you go and you try out, and the two teams or one team, depending on what it is, they get to go to the international competition, and they get a stipend from the USBF.
It's like the Olympic trials that we're just watching right now. It's the same thing. You're playing in the team trials to represent the U.S. in the upcoming World Championships. There's less hubbub about it than the Olympic trials, but not much.
Yes. I just feel like there are probably people who are watching who aren't familiar. So thank you.
Yeah, right. So United States Bridge Federation, right? There's also the Canadian Bridge Federation, okay? And there's also the Mexican Bridge Federation, which I think is Federation Mexica. It's FMB, I believe. And then there's also the Bermudan Federation. So there are 4 federations that are sort of within the North American bridge arm of bridge, and that North American bridge it is responsible for those 4 federations. Although I believe Bermuda might have sort of gone a different way with respect to international bridge.
If Bermuda wanted to have a team in the World Championships, would they have to go through?
I think Bermuda is now I think they've moved with respect to North American bridge. So they run in a different zone to try to make it to the World Championships. So I think Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. all compete for those same spots.
And I think if people have been watching this and want to kind of follow up and get more information, if they're looking at info from the ACBL, they can find that at acbl.org. For the Ed Foundation, they can go to acblef.org. for Ed Foundation. And then I know my email address, executive director at ACBL Educational Foundation.org, is on there. People can reach me directly. And then you guys have a whole contact list that people can reach out to depending on what they're interested in.
We do.
Hopefully, if people have questions or thoughts and want to know more, be involved in some way, volunteering, or how do I become a director, or any of that, they can reach out to you guys. And if they are looking at submitting a grant or they want to support youth bridge programs or something, they can reach out to us.
And I definitely could have said some wrong things, especially with the USBF. I am not I'm not completely familiar with how everything works at the USBF. So I gave you my best guess, but I could definitely have been wrong about several things, like usual.
And both the Ed Foundation and the ACBL are set up as nonprofits, I believe. But the Ed Foundation, you can actually donate. We're a 501c3, so you can donate and get a tax deduction for that. And then we can support, programs across, a broad spectrum of grant.
Right. We are also a nonprofit, but we are not a 501c3. So when you donate directly to the ACBL, it is not tax deductible.
And we have a planned giving program where people can make estate gifts or planned giving donations. And we're happy to talk to folks about that to make that lasting impact.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies. It's been a pleasure to get to speak to you both. And I look forward to seeing you in Toronto in a little over a week.
Yes.
Sounds good.
I look forward to you being our commentator at the celebrity event.
Yes. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it also.
Great. Thank you.
Yes. We just wrapped up a Spark Foundation. The show's not over. Sorry. Total... No, we just did. Ladawna's talking about the Spark Foundation. There's a celebrity pro-am on July 15th where people just bid for the opportunity to play with all sorts of, strong, some of the best bridge players in the world. And Bronia's going to be commenting on that.
And this next week, between when that ended last night for the event and the players and the event itself, people can still buy kibitzing packages. So,
right.
Oh, fun.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I will let you know when we've got this ready for publication.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everybody. Bye.